The smell hit Daniel Reed before anything else. Recycled air mixed with something sweet and rotten, the kind of scent that came from living things kept too long in small spaces. He walked past the loading docks of Station Outpost 7, his tool bag heavy on his shoulder, trying to ignore the ache in his left leg, where shrapnel still lived under the skin. Maintenance work on a frontier station paid barely enough to cover food and rent, but that was fine. Daniel wanted quiet. He wanted distance. 20 years of war had filled his head with enough noise to last several lifetimes. The station sat at the edge of mapped space, a way station where traders and explorers stopped to refuel before heading into the unknown. Dozens of alien species passed through every day. Daniel kept his head down and fixed broken pipes. It was simple. It was empty. It was what he needed. That he turned a corner near the waste processing area and saw the pen. Metal bars formed a cage about 3 meters wide, pressed against the wall like an afterthought. Inside, small creatures huddled together in a mass of shimmering scales and translucent wings. They looked like tiny dragons from old Earth stories, but fragile, like they might break if you breathed on them too hard. Daniel stopped. One of the creatures lifted its head. Its eyes were too large for its face, dark and reflective. It stared at him with an intelligence that made his chest tighten, that he should have kept walking. He had work to do. Section 9 had a coolant leak that needed fixing before the next shift. Instead, he moved closer to the pen. The creatures scattered away from the bars, all except the one that had been watching him. It stayed still, its bronze-colored scales catching the harsh overhead lights. "You looking to buy?" A voice came from behind him. Daniel turned to see Dolus, the station administrator. The Cravian had 4 arms and skin like gray rubber. 2 of his hands held data tablets while the other 2 gestured as he spoke. "Those are shimmerlings. Pretty things, but useless. Can't handle temperature changes, die from stress, break if you handle them rough. We're dumping them tomorrow." Dumping them? Daniel looked back at the pen. There had to be at least 30 of the small creatures crammed inside. Into space, humanely of course. Dolus tapped one of his tablets. "They cost more to feed than they're worth. Some trader thought they'd be valuable, found them on a dying moon somewhere. Turns out they're too delicate for any real work. Can't use them for labor, can't sell them as pets because they die too fast, can't even harvest their scales because the things dissolve after death. Completely worthless." The bronze shimmerling pressed closer to the bars, not quite touching them. Its wings fluttered, creating small currents of air that felt cool against Daniel's scarred hands. "How much for one?" The words came out before Daniel could stop them. Dolus laughed, a wet sound that reminded Daniel of malfunctioning hydraulics. "You serious? Listen, human, I've seen your pay grade. Don't waste your money on something that'll be dead in a week. Get yourself a nice cargo, might if you want a pet. At least those things are useful. I didn't ask for advice. I asked for price." The Cravian's 4 eyes narrowed. "No charge. You want to waste your time? Be my guest. Sign a waiver saying the station isn't responsible when it dies, and you can take one. Save me the disposal paperwork." Daniel nodded. "Give me the forms." 10 minutes later, he carried the bronze shimmerling in his hands. She weighed almost nothing, like holding a paper sculpture. She trembled against his palms, her scales shifting between solid and something close to mist. He could feel her heartbeat, fast and light like a bird's. His quarters were small. 1 room with a bunk, a storage locker, and a tiny bathroom. He set the shimmerling on his desk and watched her explore the space with cautious movements. She sniffed at his old jacket, draped over the chair. She touched a wrench with one delicate claw and pulled back quickly, as if the metal had burned her. Daniel pulled up what information he could find on the station's database. There wasn't much. Shimmerlings came from a world with extreme electromagnetic fields. They had complex sensory systems. They rarely survived in captivity. Most sources agreed they had the intelligence of small animals, maybe less. No economic value. No practical purpose. He looked at the creature on his desk. She had climbed onto his jacket and was kneading the fabric with her front claws, the way cats did. Her scales had stopped shimmering quite so frantically. She looked at him again with those 2 knowing eyes. "You're supposed to be stupid. Daniel said quietly. "The files say you're basically decorative livestock." The Shimmerling tilted her head. She made a soft sound, something between a chirp and a hum. It reminded Daniel of wind through broken buildings, a sound he'd heard too many times in too many ruined cities. He reached out slowly, offering his hand. She considered it for a long moment, then stepped onto his palm. Her weight was barely there, but her claws gripped with surprising strength. She climbed up his arm to his shoulder and settled there, tucking her wings close to her body. "You need a name," Daniel said. He thought about the way she moved, barely making a sound. "Whisper. That worked for you." The Shimmerling, Whisper, made that wind sound again. Daniel chose to believe it meant yes, that he had no idea how to keep her alive. The database was useless. The station workers thought he was crazy. In a week, she'd probably be dead, and he'd be alone again. But for now, she was warm against his neck, and her breathing matched his own. For the first time in months, the silence in his head felt less like emptiness and more like peace. Daniel looked at the door, thinking about the pen near waste processing. 29 other Shimmerlings waited there, scheduled to be thrown into space like garbage. He had until tomorrow to figure out what to do about that. Whisper wouldn't eat. Daniel tried the standard nutrient paste that worked for most small creatures. She sniffed it and backed away like he'd offered her poison. He tried dried protein chunks. She ignored them. He even broke down and bought expensive mineral supplements from the station store. She looked at them with what he could only describe as disappointment. 3 days after bringing her home, Daniel sat on his bunk at 0300 hours, watching Whisper huddle in the corner of his desk. Her scales had lost their shine. They looked dull, almost gray instead of bronze. She barely moved except to shift position every few hours that he was killing her. Slowly, through ignorance, but killing her just the same. Daniel pulled up the database again and read every file he could find on Shimmerlings for the 4th time. Most of it was useless. Behavioral notes from researchers who'd kept the creatures for a few days before they died. Speculation about their biology. Warnings about their fragility. Nothing about what they actually needed to survive. One file mentioned that Shimmerlings came from a world with specific atmospheric conditions and unique plant life. But the world was dying when traders found it, most of the ecosystem already gone. The file didn't list what plants, what atmosphere, what anything. Daniel looked at Whisper. She was watching him again, even in her weakened state. Her eyes caught the dim light from his computer screen. "I don't know what you need," he told her. "I'm sorry. I thought I could help, but I don't know what I'm doing." Whisper made a soft sound. It was quieter than her usual wind chime voice, like she was running out of strength to make noise at all. Something broke inside Daniel's chest. He'd seen too many things die. People, animals, hope. He'd promised himself when he left the military that he was done watching death. Yet here he was, watching another life slip away because he couldn't figure out something as basic as food. Then Whisper did something strange. She lifted one wing and pointed it toward Daniel's jacket, still draped over the chair. She made her sound again, more insistent. Daniel picked up the jacket. "What? You want this?" Whisper's scales flickered slightly brighter. She climbed down from the desk, moving slowly, and walked to the jacket when Daniel laid it on the floor. She buried herself in its folds, and her color improved. Just A-B-I-T. It took Daniel a moment to understand. The jacket smelled like him. When he was calm, she was calm. When he'd had nightmares the past few nights, thrashing in his sleep, Whisper had become almost transparent, like she was trying to disappear. She was reacting to his emotions, feeding off them somehow, or at least affected by them. Daniel sat down on the floor next to his jacket. He forced his breathing to slow, using techniques his combat therapist had taught him years ago. Techniques he'd never bothered to practice because sitting still with his own thoughts felt worse than staying busy at IN for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. Whisper emerged from the jacket folds. Her scales brightened slightly. She climbed onto Daniel's knee and settled there, her tiny body warm against his leg. For an hour, Daniel sat and breathed. He thought about nothing. He pushed away memories of war, worries about tomorrow, fears about failure. He just existed in the moment, breathing, with a small dragon on his knee. When he finally stood up, his leg had gone numb and his back ached. But Whisper looked better. Not healthy, not yet, but better. The next day, Daniel changed his approach. He moved through his maintenance work like meditation. Steady hands, calm thoughts. He carried Whisper in a modified tool pouch, and whenever he felt stress rising, he stopped and breathed until it passed. He experimented with foods in the same methodical way. Not rushed, not panicked, just systematic testing. Whisper rejected most things, but when he mixed certain algae strains from the station's hydroponics bay, she ate a few bites. It wasn't much, but it was something that by the end of the week, Whisper was stronger. She could fly short distances. Her scales had regained their bronze color. She started making more sounds, a whole range of chirps and hums that Daniel was beginning to recognize as communication. Other workers noticed. Patricia, a human trader who ran cargo through the station twice a month, stopped Daniel in the corridor. "Heard you adopted one of those dragon things," she said. "That's sweet and all, but you know it's going to die, right? They always do. Don't get too attached." A Grellet engineer named Torv laughed when he saw a Whisper peeking out of Daniel's tool pouch. "Why not get cargo mite? At least those things earn their keep. That little pretty does nothing but look nice." Daniel didn't argue with them. He just kept working, kept breathing, kept learning how to help Whisper thrive. 2 weeks after bringing Whisper home, Daniel walked past the waste processing area again. The pen was still there, but it looked emptier. He counted the shimmerlings inside. 18 left. The rest had died or been disposed of early. The remaining creatures were in bad shape. They were kept under bright, harsh lights that never dimmed. The feeding schedule was random. The waste processor next to their pen ran constantly, filling the air with noise and vibration. Daniel watched them for 10 minutes. They huddled together, their scales dull and their movements weak. Whisper, secure in her pouch, made a distressed sound. She'd never made that sound before. It reminded Daniel of crying that he found Dolus in the administration office. The shimmerlings in the pen. When are they scheduled for disposal? 3 days. Dolus didn't look up from his work. "Why? You want another one? I told you they're free. Knock yourself out. I want all of them." Now, Dolus looked up. "All of them? Human, did the first one die already and you're trying to replace it? Because I'm telling you, getting 18 more won't help. Whisper is fine. She's healthy. And I can help the others too." Dolus's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "You're serious? You actually want 18 dying creatures in your quarters?" "Yes. You'll sign full liability waivers. You'll use your own rations to feed them. You'll handle all care yourself. And when they die, you dispose of the bodies." "Agreed." Dolus pulled up forms on his tablet. "You're either crazy or stupid, probably both. But fine, they're yours. Get them out of my pen tonight." For hours later, Daniel's quarters looked like a refugee camp for tiny dragons. 18 shimmerlings, all in various states of poor health, filled every available space. He'd use his bedding to create soft nests. He'd dim the lights and set them on a gentle cycle. He'd already mixed 3 batches of the algae blend that Whisper liked. Whisper moved among the newcomers, making her wind chime sounds. The other shimmerlings responded weakly, but they responded. She seemed to be communicating with them, though Daniel had no idea what she was saying, that he was broke now. He'd spent his last credits on supplies. His quarters were overcrowded and smelled like algae and dragon musk. He had no idea if he could keep all of them alive, but as he watched Whisper gently touch her nose to another shimmerling's nose, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the kind forced on him by orders and objectives, but the kind that came from choosing to care when everyone else chose to discard. He had 23 lives depending on him now. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming that IT was exactly what he needed. 2 months passed like water through Daniel's fingers. He developed routines that would have made his old drill sergeant proud. Wake at 0500. Check each shimmerling for signs of distress. Prepare food. Adjust lighting cycles. Work his maintenance shift. Return home. Feed again. Monitor temperatures. Sleep for 5 hours. Repeat. Only 2 shimmerlings had died. Both were too far gone before Daniel got them, their systems already shutting down. He buried them in the station's memorial garden, a small plot of engineered soil where workers could plant seeds brought from their homeworlds. It felt right. The 21 survivors grew stronger. Their scales brightened into a rainbow of colors: bronze, silver, deep green, pale blue, sunset orange. They developed personalities. Some were bold, exploring every corner of Daniel's quarters. Others stayed shy, hiding in the fabric nests he'd made from his old clothes. Whisper remained the leader. She organized the others, though Daniel couldn't understand how. They would arrange themselves in specific patterns when resting, always geometric, always precise. Triangles, hexagons, spirals. It looked random at first, but Daniel noticed the patterns changed based on conditions in the room. Temperature shifts meant one formation. Pressure changes meant another. The Shimmerlings also started predicting things. Small things at first. They would cluster near the door 5 minutes before Daniel's shift ended, like they knew he was coming home. They'd move away from the ventilation panel hours before it made a grinding sound that meant the filter needed changing. Then stranger things happened. Station Outpost 7 ran emergency drills once a month, testing evacuation procedures. The alarms were randomized, so workers couldn't predict them. But 3 times now, the Shimmerlings had formed a tight spiral pattern exactly 10 minutes before the alarm sounded. Every single time. Daniel mentioned it to Ruth, the station's chief engineer. She was one of the few people who didn't mock him for keeping the Shimmerlings. Ruth was practical, focused on what worked rather than what made sense. "That's impossible," she said, checking the drill schedules on her tablet. "The system randomly generates the timing. There's no way they could know. I'm just telling you what I see." Ruth looked at him like she was calculating something. "Bring one to engineering tomorrow. I want to run some tests." "No tests. They've been poked and prodded enough. Non-invasive tests. Just scanning. I promise I won't hurt it." Daniel brought Whisper the next day. Ruth set up equipment around a clear platform and had Whisper perch in the center. The little dragon seemed more curious than afraid, tilting her head at each new device. The results made Ruth go silent for a full minute, which never happened. She ran the scans 3 more times before speaking. "Their neural structure is incredibly complex," Ruth said, pointing at images on her screen. "Look at this. These pathways here process sensory input across spectrums we can't even detect without equipment. Electromagnetic fields, radiation fluctuations, pressure variations at microscopic levels. They're not just seeing and hearing the world, Daniel. They're reading it like data." "What does that mean?" "It means they're not fragile because they're weak. They're fragile because they're sensitive. Too much input overwhelms them. Rough handling disrupts their sensory processing. They need calm environments, not because they're delicate little flowers, but because their brains are working overtime every second, processing information that would fry most species' nervous systems." Daniel looked at Whisper, who was now investigating Ruth's tool belt with careful touches. So when everyone tested them for physical work, they were testing the wrong thing. Imagine asking a supercomputer to lift heavy boxes, then declaring it useless when it can't. That's what happened to the Shimmerlings. Ruth wanted to publish her findings. Daniel refused. He'd seen what happened when corporations found something valuable. During the war, he'd watched companies strip entire planets of resources, all legal, all justified by economic need. The Shimmerlings would become tools, bought and sold, forced to work until they broke. "I'm not saying we should exploit them," Ruth argued. "I'm saying we should prove they're more than people think. Give them value so they're protected. They already have value. They're alive. That should be enough." Ruth sighed but didn't push. She kept the scans confidential. But information had a way of spreading on a small station where everyone knew everyone's business. Within a week, half the workers had heard that Daniel's dragons were actually sophisticated sensor arrays. Within 2 weeks, a corporate representative arrived. His name was Lloyd, and he wore an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the station's industrial corridors. He worked for Helix Biosystems, a company that specialized in biotech applications. "Mr. Reed, I understand you've had remarkable success with the Shimmerling specimens," Lloyd said, sitting uninvited in the station's small cafeteria. "Helix would like to make you a generous offer for your collection and any breeding rights. They're not for sale. Lloyd smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I understand emotional attachment, but consider the good these creatures could do. Disaster prediction, navigation assistance, scientific research. We could save countless lives by putting them in labs and running them until they die from stress. We have very humane facilities. No, the smile disappeared. Mr. Reed, without proper licensing, keeping exotic alien species could be considered smuggling. The penalties are severe. I'd hate to see you face legal trouble over a misunderstanding. Daniel felt his hands curl into fists under the table. He forced them to relax. Getting angry wouldn't help. Is that a threat? It's a reminder that there are regulations. Of course, if you were working with Helix as a paid consultant, those concerns would disappear. Think about it. I'll be on the station for 3 more days. Lloyd left. Daniel sat alone, his coffee growing cold. He'd been a soldier for 20 years. He knew what powerful organizations did to things they wanted. They took them one way or another. That night, Daniel sat in his quarters surrounded by shimmerlings. They sensed his stress. Their scales dimmed. Several made distress sounds. Whisper climbed onto his shoulder and pressed her small head against his cheek. I don't know how to protect you, Daniel said quietly. I'm just one person. I fix pipes. I am nobody. Whisper made her wind chime sound. The other shimmerlings responded, creating a harmony that filled the small room. It was the most beautiful thing Daniel had ever heard, like music made from light and air. He thought about what Ruth had said. The shimmerlings weren't weak. They were sophisticated, complex, capable of things other species couldn't imagine. But the galaxy only valued what it could use, and Daniel had no power to change that. Unless he could prove the shimmerlings weren't just valuable. Unless he could prove they were people, deserving of rights and protection, not property to be bought and sold. The next morning, a priority alert came through the station's communication system. A scientist named Krellin from Avorth Institute wanted to speak with Daniel about his shimmerlings. Her message was brief and direct. I've heard about your success. I've also heard rumors from Helix. If you're willing, I'd like to help you protect them. I think I know how. Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Trust was hard for him. People always had angles, always wanted something. But he was out of options, and the shimmerlings needed more than he could give them alone. He sent a reply, come talk. But the shimmerlings decide if they trust you, not me. The emergency came on a quiet Tuesday. Daniel was replacing a coolant filter in Section 4 when the station-wide alert chimed through the speakers. Not the harsh blare of immediate danger, but the steady tone that meant everyone should pay attention. Attention, all personnel. Solar flare detected from the primary star. Intensity level 5. All workers report to designated shelter areas. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Level 5 meant dangerous but manageable. The station's shields could handle it. Daniel had been through 3 flares since arriving at Outpost 7. The procedure was simple. Get to shelter, wait it out, go back to work. That he headed toward his quarters instead of the nearest shelter. The shimmerlings would be scared. He needed to make sure they were okay before locking down. The corridor leading to his section was already empty, everyone else following protocol. Daniel's leg ached as he hurried, the old shrapnel wound protesting the pace. He palmed open his door and stopped. The shimmerlings were in a frenzy. All 21 of them flew in tight circles around the room, their scales flashing in patterns Daniel had never seen before. Bright bursts of red and white, pulsing in rhythm. Whisper broke from the group and dive-bombed Daniel's communication panel, tapping specific buttons with her tail. Hey, calm down, Daniel said, but they didn't calm. If anything, they became more agitated. Whisper kept hitting the same sequence of buttons. She was trying to operate the panel, trying to bring up something specific. Daniel had taught her how to activate the voice link for emergencies, but she wasn't hitting that button. She was jabbing at the sensor readouts. Daniel pushed past her gently and checked what she was indicating. The station's external sensors showed the incoming flare. Standard radiation levels, standard electromagnetic pulse, standard duration. Everything within normal parameters for a level 5 event. Whisper screeched. It was a sound Daniel had never heard from her, sharp and desperate. She hit the controls again, harder, and the other shimmerlings formed a tight spiral in the center of the room, spinning faster and faster. Something was wrong. Daniel didn't understand what, but he trusted their instincts more than he trusted the sensors. He opened a communication channel to engineering. "Ruth, it's Daniel. Something's not right about this flare." "What do you mean?" "Sensors show level 5, standard procedure. The shimmerlings are losing their minds. They're trying to tell me something about the sensor data." There was a pause. "Daniel, I know you trust them, but we can't change emergency protocols based on Dragon Panic. The shields are calibrated for what we're seeing. Just check. Please, run independent scans." Another pause, longer this time. "Fine, give me 5 minutes. Get to shelter." Daniel didn't go to shelter. He watched Whisper and the others, trying to understand their message. They kept forming that spiral pattern, tighter and tighter. Their scales pulsed with colors in a sequence: red, orange, yellow, white, blue, violet. Over and over. It looked like a spectrum, like they were trying to show him different types of radiation. His communicator buzzed. Ruth's voice came through, tense and clipped. "We have a problem. Big problem. There's a secondary wave behind the visible flare. The standard sensors aren't calibrated to detect it. If it hits with our current shield configuration, it'll overload the power grid. Can you adjust the shields? I need to know the exact frequency and timing of the secondary wave. Without that data, I'm guessing, and if I guess wrong, we're in worse shape than if we did nothing." Daniel looked at the shimmerlings. They were still spiraling, still pulsing their color sequence. "What if I could get you that data?" "From where?" "We don't have equipment that can read that spectrum." "From the shimmerlings." "Daniel, that's crazy. You said they process information across spectrums we can't detect. You said they're reading the world like data. They're trying to show me the wave pattern right now. I just need to translate it." Ruth went quiet for 3 seconds. "I'm coming to you. Don't move." She arrived 2 minutes later, carrying portable scanning equipment. The shelter alarm was blaring now, urging everyone to evacuate corridors. They ignored it. Ruth set up her equipment and looked at the shimmerlings. "Okay, let's say you're right. How do we translate Dragon Dance into shield frequencies?" "They're using color to represent radiation types," Daniel said, watching the spiral. "Red through violet, like a spectrum. The speed of the pulses might be timing. The tightness of the spiral might be intensity. That's a lot of assumptions. You have a better idea?" Ruth pulled up her shield controls. "Talk me through what you see." For the next 8 minutes, Daniel described everything the shimmerlings did. Whisper broke from the spiral and flew to Ruth's equipment, tapping specific readings with her claws. When Ruth adjusted a frequency setting, Whisper would chirp if it was right or screech if it was wrong. That IT was impossible. It was absurd. It worked that Ruth's hands flew across her controls, reconfiguring the station's shields based on information from creatures the galaxy considered useless. The other engineers in the main control room were shouting over the communicator, demanding to know what she was doing, why she was changing protocols during an emergency. "Trust me," Ruth said, "or don't. But I'm not dying because we ignored the best sensors on this station." The flare hit 30 seconds later. The station shuddered, lights flickering. The shields held. Then the secondary wave came, invisible to standard sensors, but exactly where the shimmerlings said it would be. The reconfigured shields caught it, redirected it, bled off the energy in controlled bursts. The station shook harder. Daniel grabbed his desk to stay upright. The shimmerlings landed on every available surface, their scales shifting to calm blues and greens. Whisper settled on Daniel's shoulder, making her gentle wind chimes sound. The shaking stopped. The lights stabilized. Ruth checked her readings and let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for years. "We're alive." The shields held. If we'd stayed with standard configuration, the power grid would have failed. We'd have lost life support to half the station. The communicator erupted with voices. Dolus demanding explanations. Other engineers asking what happened. Civilians wanted to know if it was safe to leave shelter. Ruth answered them all calmly, professionally. She explained the secondary wave, the shield adjustments, the successful defense. She did not mention the shimmerlings. Not yet. When she finally closed the channel, She looked at Daniel. We need to talk about what just happened. They saved everyone, Daniel said simply. Yeah, they did. And now the question is, what do we do about it? News spread fast. By evening, everyone on the station knew that Daniel's dragons had detected a threat the sensors missed. Some people were grateful. Others were terrified, asking what else the sensors might be missing, what other dangers lurked undetected. Lloyd from Helix Biosystems sent a message within 3 hours. This proves my point, Mr. Reed. The Shimmerlings are too valuable to remain in private hands. They must be properly utilized for the greater good. I'm prepared to triple my offer. Daniel deleted the message. Then he sent a communication to Krellin, the Vorith scientist who'd offered to help. We need to talk. Now. They're coming for the Shimmerlings, and I can't stop them alone. Her reply came back in minutes. I've been researching your situation. There may be a way to protect them, but it's risky. It involves the Galactic Council, and if we fail, things get worse. Are you willing to try? Daniel looked at Whisper, at the 20 other Shimmerlings resting peacefully after saving hundreds of lives. They trusted him. They'd chosen to work with him, to share their abilities, to help despite everything the galaxy had done to them that he couldn't let them down. Not now. Not ever. Tell me what we need to do, he wrote back. Krellin arrived on a small research vessel 3 days after the solar flare incident. She was Vorith, which meant she looked like a walking mantis covered in dark blue fur. Her species valued knowledge above all else, and she'd spent 40 years studying endangered species across the galaxy. She sat in Daniel's crowded quarters, folding her long limbs carefully to avoid stepping on any Shimmerlings. Several of the dragons approached her with curiosity, sniffing at her fur and chittering softly. They're beautiful, Krellin said, her voice translator rendering her clicks and whistles into standard galactic, and much healthier than any captive Shimmerlings I've seen in records. You've done remarkable work. I just gave them what they needed, Daniel said. Food, quiet, calm. Nothing special. Everything's special. Krellin extended one of her upper arms, and a small green Shimmerling climbed onto it. Most species treat them like objects. You treated them like people. That's why they thrive. Can you help us or not? Krellin's mandibles clicked in what might have been a sigh. I can try. But first, you need to understand what we're facing. Helix Biosystems has filed a petition with the Galactic Trade Commission. They want the Shimmerlings classified as non-sentient biological resources. If they succeed, the Commission can authorize seizure for scientific purposes. That's insane. The Shimmerlings are intelligent. Anyone who spends time with them can see that. Intelligence isn't the same as sentience in galactic law. Many intelligent creatures aren't considered sentient persons. The law requires proof of complex communication, abstract thinking, and autonomous decision-making. Helix's lawyers will argue the Shimmerlings are sophisticated organic computers, no different than trained animals. Daniel felt sick, so we need to prove they're people. Yes, and I think I know how. Krellin carefully set the green Shimmerling on Daniel's desk. 3 weeks ago, I received a message from a Shimmerling Preservation Committee. They've been searching for lost colonies like yours. They want to meet you. There are more Shimmerlings? Free ones? Yes. Their home world is protected now, but many were taken before the protections were established. The committee has been trying to find survivors. When they heard about the solar flare incident, they contacted me. They're sending a delegation. 2 days later, 3 Shimmerlings arrived that made Daniel's colony look like children. They were each the size of a large dog, their scales vibrant, and their wings powerful enough to create wind when they flew. The leader introduced herself through a translation device that converted her color patterns and sounds into words. I am Cress, the ancient Shimmerling said, her scales shifting through deep purples and golds. I speak for the Shimmerling people. We have searched long for our lost ones. She examined Daniel's colony with careful attention, speaking to them in color flashes and chirps that Daniel couldn't interpret. Whisper seemed to be doing most of the talking from his group, her scales bright and her movements animated. After an hour, Cress turned to Daniel. You have cared for them well. They tell me you found them in a place of death, that you saved them when all others saw waste. They tell me you listen when they speak, that you value their voices. This is rare among the other peoples. They're amazing, Daniel said. They deserve better than what the galaxy gave them. Yes. They also tell me they have chosen to remain with you. This creates difficulty. What do you mean? Cress's scales rippled with colors Daniel had never seen Whisper produce. Shimmerling culture values choice. We do not command or force, but we also do not serve or follow. We collaborate with those who prove worthy. Your Shimmerlings have chosen you as worthy partner. They wish to stay with you and help you. This bond is sacred to us. I don't want to separate them from their people. You misunderstand. The bond is good, but Helix Biosystems wants to break this bond to force our people into labor. We must stop them. This requires speaking before the Galactic Council. Krellin leaned forward. The Council is the only authority that can override the Trade Commission. If we can prove Shimmerlings are sentient beings capable of autonomous choice, the Council can grant them protected status. But we need to demonstrate their personhood in a way the Council can't deny. How do we do that? You and the Shimmerlings testify together. You show the bond, the communication, the choices. Helix will argue against it with lawyers and corporate influence. You'll have to be better. Daniel's hands started shaking. He clenched them into fists. I'm a maintenance worker. I fix pipes. I can't argue in front of the Galactic Council. I'll mess it up. Whisper flew to his shoulder and pressed against his neck. Her scales warmed slightly, a gentle comfort. The other Shimmerlings gathered closer, creating a circle around Daniel's chair. Cress spoke again. They have already chosen. They trust you to speak truth. Can you trust yourself? Daniel looked at each of his Shimmerlings. He'd watched them nearly die in that pen. He learned their preferences, their fears, their personalities. He knew how they arranged themselves in spirals when they were content, how they pulsed red when they were frightened, how Whisper made that specific chirp that meant she wanted the temperature adjusted. They weren't property. They weren't tools. They were people with their own thoughts and desires, and they'd chosen to share their lives with him. If I mess this up, Helix takes them, Daniel said. Yes, Krellin agreed. And if I don't try, Helix takes them anyway. Also yes. Daniel took a deep breath. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. The breathing technique he'd learned to help Whisper, the one that calmed them both. Okay, tell me what I need to do. The next week was intense. Krellin coached Daniel on council procedures. Cress taught him more about Shimmerling culture and communication. The Shimmerlings themselves practiced demonstrations, showing how they processed information and made collective decisions. Daniel learned that their color language was incredibly complex. Different hues meant different concepts. The intensity of light meant emotional weight. The speed of pattern changes indicated urgency or uncertainty. What he thought was pretty flickering was actually sophisticated conversation. He also learned about their history. Shimmerlings evolved on a world bombarded by radiation and electromagnetic storms. They developed their sensitivity to survive, reading the planet's moods to find safe moments for hunting and gathering. They built a civilization based on cooperation and collective sensing, sharing information through their color speech. When traders came, they saw valuable creatures and took them. Hundreds died in captivity. The survivors were scattered across the galaxy, lost and alone. The Shimmerling people got protections eventually, but too late for those already taken. We do not hate the other peoples, Cress said, but we do not forget. Your Shimmerlings remember the pen, the harsh light, the careless hands. Yet they chose to help during the flare. They chose to save lives. This is who we are. We survive through compassion, not bitterness. On the last day before they had to leave for the council station, Lloyd from Helix sent one final message. This is your last chance, Mr. Reed. Withdraw your petition and accept our offer. Fight us, and we'll make sure you lose everything. The Shimmerlings, your job, your reputation. Is this really the hill you want to die on? Daniel showed the message to Whisper. She looked at it, then at him. Her scales shifted to determined gold, and she made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Fierce and beautiful. Yeah, Daniel said. Me too. He deleted the message and started packing for the trip to the Galactic Council. The Galactic Council chamber made Daniel feel impossibly small. It stretched upward for what looked like 50 meters, with viewing platforms arranged in circular tiers. Hundreds of species filled those platforms, representatives from worlds Daniel had never heard of, speaking languages his translator could barely parse. He stood at the petitioner's podium in the center of the floor. Whisper perched on his shoulder. The other 20 shimmerlings from his colony arranged themselves nearby in a careful formation. Cress and her delegation stood to one side, ready to translate when needed. Across the chamber, Helix Biosystems had sent 5 lawyers and a team of scientists. They looked confident, organized, expensive. Daniel wore his cleanest work coveralls and boots that he'd polished 3 times. He felt like a fraud. The council arbiter, a massive crystalline being whose species Daniel didn't recognize, activated the session with a sound like singing glass. We convened to hear petition 17,412, the matter of shimmerling sentience and personhood rights. Helix Biosystems may present their argument. The lead Helix lawyer stepped forward. Her name was Instructor Shaw, and she spoke with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never losing. Honored counsel, Helix Biosystems does not dispute that shimmerlings are remarkable creatures. They possess sophisticated biological sensors and demonstrate impressive behavioral patterns. However, sophistication does not equal sentience. She pulled up holographic displays showing brain scans, behavioral data, comparative analysis with other species. Shimmerlings react to stimuli in complex ways, yes, but so do many non-sentient organisms. They display what appears to be communication, but this is likely instinctive signaling, no different than birds flocking or insects swarming. They are, in essence, very advanced biological tools. Shaw gestured to the solar flare incident. This recent event proves our point. The shimmerlings detected the secondary wave, but did they understand what it meant? Did they comprehend the danger and choose to warn others? Or did they simply react to uncomfortable stimuli, and humans interpreted that reaction as communication? We argue the latter. She continued for 20 minutes, dismantling every argument for sentience with practiced precision. The shimmerlings had no written language, no technology, no lasting civilization structures. They showed tool use only at the level of birds or primates. Their color patterns, while complex, were likely biological responses rather than true language. The galaxy needs what shimmerlings can provide, Shaw concluded. Disaster prediction alone could save millions of lives. Keeping these resources in private hands, claiming they are persons when evidence suggests otherwise, is selfish and potentially dangerous. We asked the Council to classify shimmerlings as protected fauna with regulated commercial use. They will be treated humanely, as we treat all valuable biological assets. Daniel's stomach turned. Protected fauna. Commercial use. They were talking about people like they were machinery. The arbiter's voice rang out. The petitioner may now present counterargument. Daniel stepped forward. His hands were shaking. He'd rehearsed this 100 times with Krellin, but now every word vanished from his mind. He looked at Whisper. She touched her nose to his cheek, making her gentle wind chime sound. He started talking. Not the speech he'd prepared, but the truth. I found Whisper in a disposal pen. She was going to be thrown into space like garbage because she wasn't useful enough. I took her home because... He paused, trying to find the right words. Because I knew what it felt like to be used up and thrown away. The chamber was silent. Daniel kept going. I spent 20 years as a soldier. I followed orders, completed objectives, did what I was told. And when I was too broken to keep doing that, I was done. Discharged, dismissed, worthless. Just like the shimmerlings were worthless when they couldn't do physical labor or survive harsh treatment. He gestured to the shimmerlings arranged nearby. But Whisper wasn't worthless. None of them were. They were just in the wrong environment, tested for the wrong things, valued for the wrong reasons. When I gave them calm and quiet and respect, they thrived. They showed me abilities nobody else saw, because nobody else bothered to look. Whisper flew from his shoulder and hovered in front of the council. Her scales began shifting through colors in deliberate patterns. Cress translated, her voice carrying through the chamber. I'm called Whisper. I speak for myself and my colony. We were taken from dying world. We were put in boxes. We were tested, prodded, judged, discarded. We knew fear. We knew pain. We knew hopelessness. The other Shimmerlings began adding their own color patterns, creating a symphony of light and meaning. Cress continued translating. Then came Daniel. Scared human, broken human, gentle human. He gave us choice. Stay or go. Eat or refuse. Rest or explore. He learned our language. We learned his language. We chose together. We chose partnership. We chose trust. Whisper flew back to Daniel's shoulder. Her scales blazed gold. During the flare, we understood danger. We understood death. We chose to speak. We chose to warn. We chose to save lives, not because we were told, but because we care. Because caring is what people do. Shaw stood up. This is an impressive display, but it proves nothing. The translation could be fabricated. The behavior could be trained responses. We need more than pretty lights and touching stories. Cress stepped forward. You want proof of choice? Watch. She spoke to the Shimmerlings in color flash language. They responded, and a conversation happened that took 5 minutes. When it ended, Cress translated. I offer them freedom, return to homeworld, live with their own kind. Protection, safety, peace. Every Shimmerling in this chamber can make that choice right now. They are not bound to Daniel. They are not bound to anyone. 10 of the Shimmerlings flew to Cress's delegation. They chose home, family, familiar culture. Daniel's chest tightened, but he understood. That was their right. 11 Shimmerlings stayed with Daniel. Whisper, plus 10 others who'd chosen partnership over return. They arranged themselves in a defensive formation around him, scales bright with determination. This is choice, Cress said. This is autonomous decision. This is sentience. Some choose home. Some choose partnership. All choose for themselves. The chamber erupted in debate. Representatives argued, questioned, demanded more proof, or declared themselves satisfied. Shaw tried to object, claiming the demonstration was staged, but her voice was lost in the noise. The arbiter called for silence. It took several minutes to restore order. When it finally came, the crystalline being spoke with finality. The Council has witnessed autonomous choice, complex communication, and emotional reasoning. We rule that Shimmerlings are sentient persons with full rights and protections. Partnership protocols must be established for any Shimmerling who wishes to work with other species. All partnerships must be voluntary, with full informed consent. Helix Biosystems' petition is denied. Daniel couldn't breathe. Whisper was making rapid chirping sounds that might have been laughter or joy or relief. The Shimmerlings who'd stayed with him swirled around in celebration. Shaw was already filing objections, but they didn't matter. The Council had ruled. The Shimmerlings were people now, legally and officially. Krellin approached with what Daniel had learned was a Vorith smile. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Daniel corrected. All of us. The trip back to Station Outpost 7 took 3 days. The Shimmerlings who'd chosen to go home left with Cress's delegation, heading to their protected world. Daniel felt their absence, but he was happy for them. They deserved that choice. The 11 who stayed were content. They'd chosen partnership, and they'd chosen Daniel. It was humbling and terrifying and right. When they arrived back at the station, Dolus was waiting at the dock. Heard you won your case. Also heard you're being promoted. The Galactic Council wants to fund a Shimmerling advocacy center here. They want you to run it. I'm a maintenance worker. You were a maintenance worker. Now you're something else. Figure it out. Daniel's quarters were expanded into a proper facility. Other Shimmerling colonies started arriving, found by Cress's committee, brought to a place where they could heal and choose their own paths. Some stayed. Some left. All were given the respect they deserved. 3 months after the Council ruling, Daniel stood in the new center's common area. 15 Shimmerlings were present now. 5 had chosen partnerships with station workers. 10 were still recovering, still deciding what they wanted. Whisper landed on his shoulder, scales warm and content. Through the viewport, he could see ships arriving. More Shimmerlings coming home to a place that valued them. Ruth entered with her latest partner, a shy blue Shimmerling named Ripple. Supply ship brought news. Helix Biosystems is facing charges for attempting to enslave a sentient species. Their stock crashed. Lloyd got fired. Good, Daniel said, and meant it. He looked at Whisper, at the other Shimmerlings at the center that had become more home than anywhere he'd lived before. The galaxy had tried to throw these beautiful creatures away, had tried to turn them into tools, into products, into things without value. But they'd fought back with the only weapon that mattered, their truth. They were people. They had worth. And that worth wasn't measured by what they could do for others, but by who they chose to be. Daniel finally understood that lesson applied to him too. He wasn't worthless because he couldn't soldier anymore. He wasn't broken beyond use. He had value just by existing, just by caring, just by choosing to see worth in others when everyone else saw garbage. Whisper made her wind chimes sound, and Daniel smiled. They'd both come a long way from that disposal pen. They'd both found something better than survival. They'd found purpose. They'd found home. They'd found each other. And that was worth everything.